think we'll get started. This is session number 224, Peer Support and Parent Advocacy as part of a Pediatric Hematology Oncology department. I'm Mary Barron Nelson from Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and I want to thank you for attending this session on our last day here. I'm not going to tell you about yoga or massages because I think that's over, so never mind. And I'm sure you've found the bathrooms by now. If you haven't, then you're in trouble. Please just remember to fill out your online evaluation and don't print your CE certificate until you're completely finished with your evaluation and the conference. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We're very fortunate to have with us today two speakers. Stathi Afendoulis is the founder and executive director of Lainie's Angels, named in memory of his daughter, who he lost to Ewing sarcoma in June of 2000. Since that time, his organization has worked to develop peer support and parent advocacy programs for parents of children with cancer and blood disorders in the hospitals that serve these families. In addition, we have Diane Scott, a 20-year educator who lost a dear student of hers also to Ewing sarcoma in October of 2008. She's been a volunteer in hematology oncology at Children's Hospital in Boston since June 2009. She helps meet the needs on the floor and staffs the resource room for patients and families. She's been part of other presentations on parent support and advocacy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Diane and I are very excited to share with you the work that we've been doing for a number of years. Of course, we both have personal stories to share, and we will share those with you individually. It's my job this morning to kick off the session, get you all situated, as we say here in Louisville. I've had to learn how to pronounce Louisville because it's taken me a few iterations, but I think I'm getting there. Diane is a native of Louisville, which she will remind you of frequently. But it's a great town, and we're happy to be here. First, I'd like to just tell you how my work that I've been doing with APHON. This year, I discovered your organization. Terry Berkowitz reached out to my organization early in the year and asked if we would fund your LNEC training program, which took place in Chicago. And we gladly became one of the 4 sponsors at that LNEC training. I was there. It was a great program. LNEC is a great training resource for nurses. And at that time, we had already submitted our proposal to come and speak here. And shortly after that time, our paper was approved. Diane and I wrote the proposal up and brought it into you. So it's been great to be able to start working with your organization, because we firmly believe that nurses and certainly oncology social workers, I was at their conference in Minneapolis this year also in May doing outreach to them. And our greatest goal, as we will talk about through the next hour, is collaboration. Lainie's Angels wants to collaborate with you in order to build faith and trust and knowledge so that we can become your resource for peer support and parent advocacy in your institution. Basically, as Mary said, my story is, sort of a tragic one because I am a bereaved parent. Lainie had Ewing sarcoma. She was diagnosed in 1997 and she passed away in June of 2000. She'd be 25 today. And through that journey, I learned many things from her as a human being. I learned how graceful and how courageous children with cancer really are. It's amazing. And I know you guys see it every day. But of course, Diane and I did not choose this world. This was a choice that you made to come in and do this compassionate care, but neither one of us in our own respective stories chose to come into the cancer world. Why would anyone? It's a tough place to be. But To tell you a little bit about how Lainie's Angels came to be, as I was involved with Lainie's journey and her treatment at Robert Wood Johnson Memorial Hospital and the National Institute of Cancer in New Brunswick, New Jersey. She also had her limb salvage surgery at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Her primary tumor was in her tibia. That's where the Ewing's first presented itself. But while I was there, if you go on our website, you'll see a number of little video snippets that I created this year to sort of inform individuals about what we're trying to do, because one of the greatest challenges, as Mary and I were talking about, was getting the word out there so that people know we are here, that there is a resource for parents. It's one of the most difficult things to do. It's probably our biggest challenge to date. So in order to do that, I did some small videos just to explain the genesis and the evolution of the organization. And one of the things that I talked about, one of the questions that was posed was, what was the inspiration for Lainie's Angels? How did you decide what your mission was going to be? And of course, the first inspiration was my kid. I loved her. I wanted to honor her in some way, memorialize her life. That was my initial reaction. But the mission actually came to me before she even passed away. I had become involved with the Institute for Children with Cancer and Blood Disorders in New Jersey because one of the things that I remembered most profoundly about Lainie's treatment was that the nurses station was always so busy on the unit. And everyone would flow through that nurses station, parents, doctors, and everybody else, food orderlies and everyone. And I remember being so impressed with the way the nurses, who ultimately became our friends, worked there to sort of traffic everybody in and out of the unit. And that was during the daytime. But in the evening, when, those long days of infusion therapy can go on and on, I would gravitate out to the unit in the evenings, and sooner or later, the other parents would come out and we'd hang out with the nurses, or we would just talk with one another about our experiences, what's happening at home, what's happening with our other kids, what's happening in our jobs and our marriages. And so when I became involved with the Institute and was on their board, I wanted to bring this sort of peer mentoring support, this experience that I had at the nurses station, to parents. I thought this was just the best way to get comfort and to get support from someone who was actually going through the same experience that I was. And after Lainie passed away, I began to do research into parent support and parent advocacy, and that's when I discovered the program that we now have and that we are going to present to you today. But first, I made a solemn promise to my friends at APHON, and I forgot to do it, and that is to disclose to you that Diane and I do not have anything to sell you, and we don't have any industry relationships whatsoever. And so we are here as parents and as advocates. I'm not sure how familiar any of you are with the Parent Advocate Program, or exactly what parent advocacy is, as defined by our model. But a parent advocate, as defined by our model, is a parent whose child has had cancer or a blood disorder. And regardless of the outcome of the child's disease, they can, in time, become a parent advocate. Throughout the years that we've been doing this, the one thing I discovered initially was that parent advocacy was not a standardized form of treatment or care. But there was, in fact, a standardized program that was out there. The Parent Advocate Program that we have was created at Hasbro Children's Hospital in Rhode Island in the early 1980s, approximately 1981. In 1982 or 83, I don't know the exact year, Dr. Harvey Cohen, who is now in the Lucille Packard Children's Hospital in San Francisco, became the chief oncologist at Golisano Children's Hospital in Rochester, New York. And he left Rhode Island to go to Rochester. And when he did, he took this parent advocacy program with him. We have a couple of publications that you can get off of our website that will define in detail for you the parent advocate program. There is a clinical study. The clinical study was done in 1992, and it was done at the University of Rochester Strong Medical Center, which is now the Golisano Children's Hospital. Tom Golisano, the founder of Paychex, donated quite a bit of money, and they renamed the hospital from, bless you. The publication that I'm speaking of was published in 1992 in the Journal of Psychosocial Oncology, and I can happily send you these things. You can also find it on our website in a PDF form. And it's called The Development of a Parent Advocate Program as Part of a Pediatric Hematology Oncology Service. This was the first clinical study that was done documenting the effects of parent advocacy and setting forth a job description, goals, and just exactly what the parent advocate does as part of the healthcare team. This is another aspect that is unique to parent advocacy because in our hospital-based programs, the parent advocate becomes a member of your healthcare team. Usually, if the program is hospital-based, they're supervised by a pediatric social worker. If it's an online-based program, which we provide, then they are trained and vetted, by Lainie's Angels, and they still have to meet the criteria of parent advocacy, which is primarily to be a parent whose child has had cancer or a blood disorder. A little bit later, we'll go through the responsibilities, both general and specific, of what that job entails. There are also a couple of other studies, which I'd like to share with you now, just a couple of quotes anyway. This study was done by Jeffrey Dunn et al., and it was called A Review of Peer Support in the Context of Cancer. It was done actually in Australia, and I would just like to read it to you. You can read it along with me, but basically the key factors that we're looking at in parent advocacy are these, that their study suggested that peer support programs help by providing emotional and informational support from the perspective of shared personal experience. And this is truly the foundation of parent advocacy. The parent advocates are not nurses, they're not doctors, they're not psychologists or social workers, but they do have a unique perspective through their own shared personal experience. The study validates this by saying that validation of difficult emotions is facilitated, social isolation and stigma are reduced, optimism about the future and hope are promoted, and experiences are normalized. And these are some of the things that that Diane and I are going to talk about in the second half of the presentation. Going further, from your peer group, which is the Oncology Nursing Forum, Pam McGrath, an MA in 2002, did a study of leukemia patients and their families and studied how integration and support of parents by parent advocates or by peer support parents helped in their study. And her conclusion was that parents need sensitive, understanding, and compassionate support, which is an essential part of the total care of children, ensuring that the hospital is a place where parents' feelings are understood and respected. And ultimately, these are the foundations of our parent advocate program. These are the things that we strive for. It's really all about compassionate care. The parent advocate comes to you as a group and becomes part of your team and provides a complementary service. And we always like to say that it is complementary because, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, there's always a certain amount of reluctance and fear, and there are obstacles within the healthcare industry, as we all know, for many, many reasons, some of them legal, some of them emotional. But we believe that these obstacles certainly can be overcome. Our primary purpose here today is to build collaboration with you, to collaborate, and to have you send your parents to us. We have, for the last 13 years, established programs in hospitals across the country, which we'll review in New York City. We've supported Golisano. We have helped establish a program in Toronto at Sick Kids, and also at Children's Memorial Hospital, which is now the Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. But why collaborate? We believe that in collaboration, we can eliminate resistance and improve the benefits that families have in terms of care. The improved care that the parent advocate provides to nurses, to social workers, through a collaboration can improve the care that the family has. And we are going to hopefully provide you with some examples and some key steps in this partnering. But first I want to present some of the obstacles, some of them tongue-in-cheek, some of them true, about some of the things that we've experienced over time, some of the things that we've heard from nurses and social workers. Oops, where is that? But first, as I mentioned to you, the program was initiated at CURE in 1987. Basically, the success of some of these programs has been attributed to the advocate's background, their shared experience. Certainly, the acceptance by staff is crucial, because if the staff does not accept the parent advocate and allow them to come in and work with them, then honestly, the entire effort of parent advocacy becomes undermined, certainly in a hospital setting. We want the nursing practitioners and the nurses, social workers, doctors to have the support of the advocates. The relationship with CURE as a community-based sponsoring organization, and these are some of the programs, as I mentioned to you, that we have established. And currently, they're in these cities, and it is being practiced to some degree in other organizations. But as I mentioned earlier, we want to standardize the care and the treatment, and we would like Lainie's Angels to become sort of a clearinghouse for all of you, a place where you can confidently send your parents, and you can call us for help and support if you have any needs whatsoever. We want to be there not just for the parents, but for the nurses, doctors, social workers, and child life specialists as well. Here's basically the general role as we see it of what a parent advocate does. They provide empathy. They liaison to the medical and psychosocial staff to resolve parents' concerns and or problems. And they help with basic needs. Orientation to the medical center, information about the resources that are available there, local agencies, and other things. Oh, and by the way, if a program is hospital-based, the parent advocate usually comes from that hospital. Their child was treated there, and they're from that city, and they know the doctors, they know the nurses, and so ultimately they are able to have an intimate knowledge of the hospital and where the parents' resources might be. Oh, and by the way, if you have any questions, please just ask. We don't need to. Mary's here to mentor us and monitor us, but if you have any questions at all, just please shoot your hand up and I'll stop rambling. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have with regard to your own programs or your own experiences. And certainly compassion and encouragement are based on a shared experience, which I said earlier is the key to parent advocacy. Basically, the parent advocate, as I said again, it's a complementary job. The advocate, as we see that individual, is there to help you. But they're also there to build that bridge between the parent that only they can build through their shared experiences. And so this basically works in two ways. It helps the parent have a liaison, someone to share, but it also helps you because it minimizes some of the time you might have to spend liaisoning and talking with the family, because the parent advocate can actually do that job for you. When your unit is packed and you're taking care of people, and you don't have the time to stop and chat with mom or dad, the parent advocate is there to get the information and to let you know what's happening in that room. That way you can, as a nurse, direct the services that might need be. tell her to send them to the social worker. Let's call the doctor. Let's get child life in here. So ultimately, it's very synergistic, and it works together, and that is exactly what we want the parent advocate to do. It's a complementary role. It's tiered, and they are there to serve the medical staff. Again, we want them to keep the members informed of everything they do. Ultimately, they have an obligation, both ethical and moral and medical, to let you know, or the social worker, if something is happening in that room. And of course, in order to do that, they need to meet regularly with the family, which we encourage them to do. Certain hospitals allow access 100% of the time. Other departments don't. We're not sure why, but that's the way it goes. But ultimately, we deal with that obstacle, and we do it. We also ask that the parent advocate in our programs record their interactions or interventions, briefly, in some kind of notes with the social worker, so that they know, so everybody has a record of what's happening with those particular families. The general responsibilities are listed above. You can take a look at these and print them out. They're pretty basic. It's assisting the family with functions, paying attention to what the disease is, informing the healthcare providers of their psychosocial issues, and then meeting with the families immediately upon diagnosis or soon after. We always love it when the doctors let our parent advocates meet the parents immediately or shortly thereafter, so that they know they have a parent there to talk to, somebody who's been down that road. It doesn't always happen, but we certainly encourage it. We also encourage them to be allowed to go on rounds at some point or another. Again, that doesn't always happen either for privacy issues, but sometimes it does. Specific responsibilities are to provide the emotional and advocacy services, both inpatient and outpatient. Our parent advocates, go into the clinic as well as work on the unit, so that we want them to be wherever the family is. We want the mountain to go to Muhammad, and not vice versa. We ask that they, yes.
So is the advocate for the whole unit, or is it one-on-one with a patient?
The advocate works one-on-one with families, but they serve the entire unit.
Like if you have a 24-bed unit, you would almost be making rounds and everything, and in that one-on-one, I don't know that I.
Right, it definitely gets difficult. We usually ask that the hospital try to find 2 advocates, 2 or more, if we can get them in there and we can afford to pay them, because these positions are paid. They are not volunteer. Lainie's Angels provides grants to pay the advocates. They're part-time jobs, but that's why we like to split the advocacy work between 2 advocates. That way you can get 5 days of coverage, or 4.5. So ultimately, the advocates, will Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, share Wednesday, or split a day. And they also do, if it's allowed and the hospital doesn't mind, they'll take phone calls. Most of them will take phone calls when they're not on the unit or in the hospital. They're very generous with their time, but ultimately, until we can get full-time advocates, working 40-hour weeks, it's a tough call to make the coverage. And you're right, 24-bed unit is a big unit. God willing, there's not 24 people in there at every time, but sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. And also, again, it's this whole idea of collaboration. The advocate is trusting you to, when they come in, say, "Hey, Marcia, number 5 is having a rough day today. Number 3 is good," and the advocate really just pops in. "Hi, I'm here. Do you need me for anything?" "No, we're good." And it's really that basic and that simple. It can be a real crisis, or it can be simply a hi, hello, what do you need? I don't need anything, we're great, see you next week. So ultimately, the 2 advocate system works really, really well. They've been doing that up at Golisano for 30 years. We have 2 advocates at Mount Sinai in New York. There's 2 advocates in Toronto now, and there's 1 advocate in Chicago. But our Chicago program is unique because that's a palliative care parent advocate, and not an on-therapy advocate, which is a whole different animal in and of itself. And so basically, these are some of the specific responsibilities that the parent advocate does, just on a day-to-day basis. They do coffee hours, they make rounds, they attend funerals and wakes, and they can also do coffee hours and things like that. Almost anything that the department will allow, that they will do to support the families. Basically, the confidentiality issues, as you all know, are there. We expect the parent advocate to conduct themselves just as you would. There's total amount of trust. There's a level of professionalism that we train for. We train our advocates in what not to do as opposed to what to do, because that's more important sometimes in healthcare, to know what your limitations are. That way you can do the best job possible. So we like to hold them to the same rigorous standards that you are held to in your work as a parent advocate. They establish professional boundaries. They're expected to know how to behave on the unit, who to talk to, never intrude. These are all things that we talk about in our training process with them. We ultimately really want them to be perceived and to be understood to be a professional advocate that is working with the healthcare team, to understand hospital policies and communicate them accurately just as you would. That is why our advocates also go through a hospital-based training as well as our training, usually. That's usually a requirement. HIPAA, we all know about that, and we educate them. And so why not me is the question that parents ask sometimes when we approach a hospital about the obstacles of, or I say, I'm a parent advocate. I'm a dad who wants to work in your hospital. I've been trained and I wanna come in. We've heard some of these objections or obstacles. And I wrote this slide. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, so I was trying to be a little humorous. But I mean, these are things that actually do happen. They'll try to take over. Will they try to take over my job? Will they try to do what I do on the unit or on the floor? Will they give medical advice? Will they get in my way? Will they, in some way or another, interfere with the things that I'm trying to do as a medical professional? Because I'm the nurse. I'm the medical practitioner, and ultimately your responsibility is in many ways greater than the parent advocates in terms of how you treat the parent. So will they get in my way? Do I have to worry about them all the time? On the opposite side of that is, these parents are so fragile, and we don't want them to do more than they should. We worry about them. Especially if a parent is bereaved. A lot of healthcare professionals have concerns with bereaved parents being parent advocates. I'm here to tell you that some of the best advocates in the world are bereaved parents, because ultimately, once they're out 2 years, they can enter into our program, and they are truly, very aware of their own bereavement and what it means to be talking to a parent who still has a child in treatment, who still has hope, who is working for a cure. Those are things that a bereaved parent genuinely understands and has lost. So in that respect, a bereaved parent really is a great person to have as an advocate. And of course, that topic does come up at times, and we always instruct our advocates to tell the parent, my child either did survive or didn't survive, but I'm here for your child. Your child's outcome is only known to God. He's the only one who knows what the outcome will be. None of us do, so we can't guess at it. Yeah?
Do you have time span as far as how long the child is on therapy for the parent advocate?
Do you mean in terms of how long the parent advocate serves the child and the parent?
No, just to be a parent advocate if your child is only treated for 3 months and passes away, or
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we don't have a cutoff. It's a fair question. We normally, some of those, that has happened. We've had families where the child has died, within a month of birth because of extremely rare cancer or tumors. But no, we don't have a cutoff. I think it truly depends on the individual. I mean, we also entrust on our hospital-based programs the social workers and the healthcare team who's worked with the potential advocates to say to us, we like this person. We know their background. Ultimately, we facilitate the hiring experience, but we don't make the call at the end of the day. You guys do. Your institution does. Nurses, doctors, social workers, everybody has to sign off on the advocates. Every department has to sign off on the advocates. Will they? Yes. Correct. Yes, they go through an interview process. It's a relatively lengthy one, but many of the hospitals that we do work with, the nurses and the social workers know almost immediately who they would like to have as parent, or they know parents, because a lot of parents in the hospitals are actually talking to each other. They're doing this already, but it's just not standardized. There's no group that says we're the parent advocates, we're the support mechanism that can do it. So this is something that we are trying to build the bridge to with Lainie's Angels in that respect.
The resistance we've had to any program, we've had some parents come in and try to do this in our institution before.
Correct.
But the problem is that then we have the other one that they're not good for each other. They don't even
Yes.
be talking outside of the nurse's desk.
That's correct.
Because, their horror stories become this person's reality all of a sudden, and it's not their reality.
Yeah, well, one of the obstacles that we've had is, co-workers' horror stories about terrible parents, who come in and God bless them, they have good intentions, but they're the last person you want to put in a room with another parent. And we have had that happen. We had down in South Carolina, we had that happen. One of the women who interviewed for our program, which unfortunately didn't happen down there for different reasons, I called the child life specialist and I said, this and so applied for the parent advocacy position. She goes, oh no. We don't want her here. We don't even talk to her. Don't write her back. I'm like, oh my. I felt kind of guilty. But they know, and we have to trust that. We have to trust that some parents just have an agenda. But it is a leap of faith, in many instances. You never know what a human being is going to do in psychosocial services. I mean, there's bad doctors and bad psychiatrists and bad people. Bad nurses and bad people out there, and they're out there, and we don't know. So I say we do the best we can to screen and vet people, and we don't shut anybody out, but we just don't let everybody in either. And that's why we have a standardized model, and we study these obstacles, we study these things, so that we know what's going on. Absolutely, please, Diane, come sit right in.
Just to add on to that, in terms of online support, which I know that Lainie's Angels is developing more of the online support, if you think about that, that's unregulated, right? And parents that are in this desperate situation are going to be on the internet like crazy. And so Lainie's Angels being a resource where you'll know what sort of training and support people have had, that can be a place to direct parents as opposed to, all the variety of blogging and whatnot that's out there.
And now I'm turning it over to Diane because I've gone way over my time.
Oh, that's all right. And the stuff that I'm going to present, I'm going to go pretty quickly because it's all stuff that you know so well. And as you know, I'm kind of visiting this world also. I'm an educator by training. I'm a guidance counselor in Boston. And so I certainly have a psychology background myself, and I've worked with kids and families for a long, long time. But I am not working professionally in the field. I'm a resource room volunteer at Children's Hospital in Boston. And I should say, in case you don't know it, we have a unique partnership in Boston with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Children's Hospital. So kids with blood disorders and cancer are getting their outpatient treatment in the Jimmy Fund Clinic at Dana-Farber, and then we have the inpatient unit. So I work in the inpatient at Children's Hospital on the floor, as well as in the resource room for patients, siblings, families, et cetera. So when Stathi told me that he gets this reaction often of like, oh, I don't know if we want to let parents talk to other parents. To him, it comes, why not me with the question mark? Excuse me. To me, it's why not you with an exclamation point from my perspective, of where I'm coming from. And I mean, the reasons are really up here. But I want to start with a question. Who in the room are parents? I figured it would be most of us. What would you say, somebody volunteer, what would you say is your primary role as a parent as you see it? Yes, ma'am. Advocate for your child, right? Your child becomes your first and foremost, the second they're born or before that, right? I have an 8.5-year-old daughter, and we all know that keeping them well, healthy, safe, and being their advocate is the number one role, right? So you have a child, the child gets the diagnosis of cancer. All of a sudden, that role, your primary role, is incredibly compromised. and you're learning a whole new world, a whole new language, and it's all out of your control. So I encourage everybody to think from your own professional background, but also to think through some of the stuff we're going to talk about quickly from the perspective of being a parent yourself. Quickly, my story about how I connected with Stathi and the Lainie's Angels work, because there actually is not a parent advocate program per se in Children's Hospital in Boston. But as an educator myself, as Mary said, introducing me, one of my students who also coincidentally had the exact same type of cancer as Stathi's daughter, Ewing sarcoma. She was diagnosed in the 8th grade, and I was her advisor all through high school. And we have a small school anyway, but she was in a small group that I had as an advisory group, so I came to know her and her family extremely well. She has a younger sister, 2 years younger. And Jamie had gone through treatment, and things were looking good. Junior year, clean scans. We were looking at, the college process, which is what I do with the students, beginning to work on that, and then got the news that it was back and had metastasized and that she was terminal. And Jamie was just had that incredible courage, hope, and determination of spirit that Stathi talked about, and I know you all see in people every day, and was adamant that even though they were looking at, investigative therapies, clinical trial stuff, that I come to the hospital room and bring my laptop and that we work on the college process. She was just driven about that, and so proud of her. She submitted her college applications on October 7th of 2008 and passed away on the 11th. I mean, she was that kind of fight to the end kind of person. But in my, what I did with my own grief then was to start volunteering at the hospital after I was kind of through it a bit. So I've been volunteering in the resource room ever since, because I felt like, there are all these families going through this. I want to be there to help in any way I can. But of course, I've stayed close with Jamie's family and saw her sister through the college process. And in that, her father, who's a working class Irish-American Bostonian FedEx driver, and he doesn't talk to anybody about anything. And because we had gone through that together, he wound up being Jamie's primary caregiver at the end. And he was talking with me, and it got to a point where I felt like I don't have everything you need here. And so I went in search of resources for him, actually, for their family, and found a book that Stathi co-authored that he can tell you more about, and you can order if you'd like. It's an incredible resource. But I bought the book for Tom Connors, Jamie's father, and he immediately called me that night and said, "Have you read this book?" And I actually hadn't. I had flipped through it. He's like, "Have you read this book? This guy, his daughter had Ewing sarcoma, same thing, whatever." And so I read the book in connection with Tom, and before Father's Day was coming that year, I just reached out to Stathi. I thought, what the heck, who knows? And I said to him, here's the story. I have this dad. I feel like it's going beyond what I can do. And he's not the type of guy that's going to, go get counseling, formal counseling. And Stathi was coming to Boston anyway, and I connected them, and I just saw the power of just something that a parent who's been through it can give another parent that just nobody else can provide. So anyway, that's why I'm here. So I say, why not? Parents who've been through it, whether their child, had a successful outcome, which is what we all hope, or in the case of bereaved parents, they're an untapped resource is the way I feel about it. They're a very rich resource that's going to come into the hospital setting free or very low cost, and can be an incredible part of the care team, as Stathi said, in a complementary way. So again, all of this, but as we said, your primary role as a parent, incredibly threatened and very vulnerable. And you still have the responsibility of your family, if you have other children as well, which many people do. Being the primary caregiver to your child through their treatment, not the medical caregiver, but caregiver in lots of other ways. And having to quickly absorb all of this information, understand it enough to feel like you're making informed decisions on behalf of your child. And meanwhile, having all the emotions, all the stresses. And one thing on here that I wanted to stress is just, I think people aren't as aware as maybe they should be about the financial implications too. There are lots of other costs. It certainly ranges, but lots of parents having to take time off, sometimes in job situations where that's not going to be covered, or they're going to lose extra opportunities. Obviously, other caregiving activities, transportation costs, and so forth for siblings while you're dealing with treatment with your child. And this slide I really like. I helped Stathi with another training in Toronto and saw this slide for the first time. But I think this just really shows visually the emotional roller coaster that parents are going through all through the process. And there are in the emotional roller coaster, obviously, the parent advocates can be helpful all along the journey, but I think especially when you got the steep declines. Initial diagnosis, definitely if there's a relapse after treatment, and obviously in the case that someone becomes terminal. And when I helped with that other training in Toronto, I was just really struck by, there were 20, 25 people all training as parent advocates. And there was a mom there whose son was very young, going through his treatment. She was there with an infant child that she had as well, and just looking, like she had been through it. And she just said at one point, we got the diagnosis, and in the hospital, all of a sudden, there's this barrage of people, and I'm this person, and trying to absorb it all. And she said, the one other person I wished would come in the room was just somebody else who said, I'm a parent who's been through it, and I'm here for you. And that just really struck me. The other thing is that in education, at least, I'm sure you all had this a little bit in your training when you talk about compassion fatigue. I know social workers go through that. In my own psychology training, I had it. The oxygen mask principle, right? When we're traveling on an airplane with our child, and they say, put yours on first so that you can best, assist your child. We all know that goes out the window. Something's going on with your kid, you're going to take care of your kid first and foremost. So self-care often goes out the window, right? And you think of all the stresses, all the emotions, you're trying to still deal with work, still deal with your marriage, deal with your other children, all of those things while you're going through this, and your self-care goes out the window. And then it becomes even harder to deal with all of those things and make good decisions. And I think there's something to, myself as a volunteer or a social worker or even nurses, talking to parents about self-care, but that another parent who's been through it can sort of give you a unique permission to do that self-care. When other people say it, it's like, yeah, that sounds good, and I know I should do that, but to have another parent who's been through it saying, you really need to do it, it kind of, I think, can give a permission that you might not feel otherwise. This is just a verbal representation, I guess, of the emotional roller coaster. And I do think that there are, when you think about the trajectory of the process, some really critical and sensitive issues, whether you're talking about end-of-life care or long-term survival issues that another parent who's been through it can be helpful with. Mary?
I just wondered if you have part of your training that deals with coming to that acceptance at the end of life. I have a parent right now who is so angry that her son is dying, and it's been months, and she won't let us help her. Everything we try to do for him, she just rejects us, and I think she would be a perfect person to have a parent advocate, but do you have that as part of your training to deal with anger?
Basically, when that happens, when you have a bereaved, a person who's anticipating grief, we put them in touch with parents who are bereaved. We assign them an advocate who is a bereaved parent, because really that individual can speak to that anger. I mean, I've talked to parents myself whose kids are dying, and basically it's a commiseration, but you need to hear it from someone who's actually been through it. I mean, I've been where you're at because, my Lainie, when she was terminally ill for 14 months, and I can tell you that she, thank God, did well during those 14 months, but for the parent, it's which day will it be? And you're just anticipating that day. And even though you're getting ready for it and you're preparing yourself for it to some degree, but this sort of, denial and inability to cope with it is a really difficult problem. And we don't have specific psychosocial training in ours. We basically trust that the mother will ultimately maybe speak to a parent who's lost their child. I don't know if you've tried that, but basically, finding an individual who said, look, I have a parent who lost their child and they know what you're going through, and would you like to speak to them? Do you think it would help? But having Lainie's Angels to offer that is probably our best thing. But in terms of our training sort of focuses on their advocacy and their work and just the way they speak to the parent advocate and to the parent. Yeah.
Okay, so just to finish this one up, I'm thinking again particularly about the either end-of-life care issues we're just referencing or long-term survival issues. I think about it myself, having an 8.5-year-old daughter, and I think, having a child going through this and making the decisions about whether or not to freeze eggs, for example, blows my mind. And parents always talking about if treatment is successful, always waiting for that other shoe to drop, right? So there are issues sort of whichever way things go. This slide, I think it speaks for itself, right? But when parents are talking to anybody other than, the members of the care team, how's it going? People are well-meaning and want to know, and they really care, but you're supposed to say, we're good. You're supposed to be strong, you're supposed to be hopeful, you're supposed to be positive, and meanwhile, your world's falling apart, right? You're in living hell. So what helps? Again, you guys are the front lines on this. You see it every day. You probably absorb a lot of it. Although you are medical professionals, you're probably helping with a lot of the non-medical needs that your patients and families are having. But I think that, the important thing that we would share is that parent advocates can help in all of those areas. Parent advocates can be a part of the care team and helping absorb some of those non-medical issues. Because we know you're busy people, and your primary role there is to be a medical care provider, but there are all of these non-medical issues as well. One other thing I would say, too, is Stathi referenced the evenings before, and that is when I'm at Children's, I'm there in the evenings, and the social workers have gone home. So I work collaboratively with the nurses all the time. And the nurses are the ones that, you're going in and out of the rooms and you're seeing what's going on, and they'll grab me constantly. This person needs this person needs this. And it can be from the, mundane, mom really needs to get out for a cigarette break, can you hang out in there for 15 minutes, to a more emotional, support for parents and what they're dealing with. But just a super quick, well, maybe I shouldn't go through this story. I think we got to make sure we've got time for the other stuff. All right. So in super quick story, it's just I arrived one evening. I'm usually there from 5 to 8:30 or 9. And evenings are kind of when it all happens, too, because then you got everybody's tired at the end of the day. Parents are coming in having worked. They often have siblings with them, as well, trying to make sure patient can get some food in them, what's going on for the day, who's staying over that night, all those kinds of issues. So evenings, at least as far as I see it, a lot goes on in the evenings that includes a lot of those stresses coming out and those non-medical needs. And often, at least in my situation, there isn't a social worker right there. So I've had situations where, I'll tell one quick story that I came in and another volunteer who was leaving said, "Oh, you're here right in time for the Irish Step Team performance." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool, right?" So there was an Irish Step Team that was doing a performance for the patients in the resource room. And I go and I see it, and I know that one of our patients had been on the step team. She had to have an amputation. She will not be able to be part of that, but it was her team coming and them saying, "We want to come and do a performance for the other kids on the floor." And then it sort of all went from there. As soon as their performance was over, there were two of her friends who were crying in the hall, like they just could not handle being there and being on the floor. And then one of those young women, I was talking with her. She was a teenager, and I'm used to dealing with teenagers all the time, so I'm working with her. And then her mom and the patient's mom are talking with each other. And then the patient's mom was talking to me about how hard it is to deal with your friends whose children are going on with regular life, and the girls had just come from the national competition and so forth. And then one of the tasks I had for the night was giving out information about the Hole in the Wall Gang camp. The registration was coming up, so I'm going around to the rooms. And one dad just sort of said, can we step outside the room and talk for a second? And he was telling me about his daughter, who was also a teenager. He was having some conflicts with her about decisions in her care, and he was really struggling with how to, deal with what he thought and his wife thought maybe should happen versus, letting her take control of her own care. And then started talking to me also about some stresses in their marriage. And there are times when I feel like I'm I hope, a little deeper than your average volunteer, because I went through this with Jamie and her family. I have psychology training, you know, I am a guidance counselor, and yet for me, sometimes I just feel like, oh, I wish I had a parent who'd been through this that I can give you to talk to. So I just feel like that's, it's really, really important. Go through these super quick. Obviously, parents are dealing with stresses in just about every area of their life, in every relationship that they have as they're going through it, including even super well-meaning relatives, friends, co-workers, and unfortunately, sometimes because they're so stressed, it coming out at you as well, as we know. And then, of course, there always are cultural and religious considerations, and all of those are sensitive and can be very emotional, and parent advocates can play a key role in helping to meet some of those needs as well. So if families have all of these needs and Lainie's Angels can help make the parent advocates part of the care team, how do they make this happen? I'll turn it back to Stathi.
And I will be quick because we are running out of time. So again, like I said in the beginning, the reason that we are here is to collaborate. Our goal at Lainie's Angels is to collaborate with you and to ask you to consider collaborating with us, to go back to your institutions, to search your own hearts, to look at your own needs as nurses in this incredible job that you do, and consider collaborating with us for success. We can be more successful together than separately. And of course, just a list here that I want to thank, actually quickly, a couple of people, my associates at St. Jude's and also Patricia Fennell at Albany Health Management. They did 2 wonderful studies. I've cited some work from their studies that support what Lainie's Angels has been doing, and I want to thank them for their contributions. Ken Mitten and Judy Franklin at St. Jude's. 2 wonderful social workers who have helped me a lot, and Patricia up in Albany. And Patricia did a very definitive study on stresses and how advocates can relate and help patients and parents. And here are just some of the things, and we'll go over them very quickly. Basically, it's why we can be successful. Parent advocates can collaborate with you on all these things to provide these outcomes. Comfort and education, of course, understanding and encouragement about what's happening to them, facilitating coping mechanisms and hope, because ultimately, as Diane referenced the slide, the peaks and valleys, your coping mechanisms are always being tested. Just when you think you got it, bang, some other side effect comes up that you never anticipated, and you're down again. And so your hope goes up and down. It's a fleeting thing, but it's there. The greatest thing that collaboration can do for parents whose kids have cancer, and for us to work together on this, is to empower the parents as decision makers. If the parents believe and know that they have an empathetic ear, and that you and the parent advocate together are working in their best interests, then they will make the right decisions, the better decisions, or the tough decisions. Because we all know in cancer, there are no wrong decisions. You do the best you can. You're confronted with incredibly life-threatening situations, and so you just do the best you can. And so collaborating is successful. It also helps us establish relationships, support emotional and logistical support. Nurses and parent advocates together can cover all these bases. Again, visiting families, looking, keeping things confidential, helping parents to understand what they're hearing from the medical staff, because as you all know, they don't. They nod their heads, they sit in the rooms, you leave, and then they're like, well, what the hell did they just say to me? Or they don't even hear you, and they come back a day later and they ask you, and you're like, well, Janet, I told you that yesterday. And it was like, that went right over my head. So again, understanding what they're hearing from the medical team, a parent advocate can collaborate and reassess and reiterate those things. And so we provide emotional support from prognosis, helping people in the environment when they're there, reading the hospital floor, assessing emotional responsiveness to determine how you can help. That's something the parent advocate can do. They can assess the emotional state of the parent and see where the family's at and say, hey, here's the heads up. They're not doing so great in there today. They might need something, and they can help in that respect. And again, Parent advocates are friends to the children. They can be individuals that provide spiritual support, not just spirits high, but spiritual support. They can get involved with the families on a personal level, something that's hard for you guys to do, and orient parents to resources. And they can also support bereaved families. So today, I have a call to action for you. And here are the requirements of the call to action, and I hope you'll all do it at some point. Help us recruit parents for our training initiative. We are currently involved in a training initiative where we want to find advocates, people who you believe could serve parents, to become part of our internet support network. We will come to your facility, train the advocates, and prepare them in our program, as long as they are recommended by you. And this is something that we want to build because we recognize how difficult it is to create hospital-based programs for many, many reasons. Money being one, but outpatient infusions and treatments being more prevalent now than they were even back when Lainie was treated 13 years ago. Champion our program in your hospital. If you believe we can help there, help us help you. Talk to people. Talk to your social workers. Talk to your doctors. Say, I found this great program. I think it can help. They can help us a couple of different ways. What do you think? Call me. I'll send you material. I'll come and visit you. I'll do whatever I can because my goal is to make this happen in as many hospitals and in as many places as possible. But ultimately, to be there so we can talk to these parents. Also, contribute to the research. We need nurses to study this stuff. We need social workers to study how parents like me can be an asset to you, because these parents don't really realize what an asset they can be. You can go be a parent advocate. It can be a career. It doesn't need to necessarily be just a volunteer position or just a paid stipended position. We've had some of our volunteers who have gone on to full-time healthcare positions. You know, they started as parent advocates, and now they're full-time healthcare practitioners elsewhere. This can be certainly a stepping stone, and there's a dearth of research on peer support and parent advocacy, and you guys are on the front lines, as Diane said. So please, send your parents to us. Be our champion. We are here for you. Let people know that Lainie's Angels is a resource for parents, even if they just want to call us. You've met me now, you've met Diane, you know what we stand for, you can trust us, and we want to help your parents. So contact us at lainiesangels.org. You can write me at Stathi at lainiesangels.org, and I absolutely will respond. Oh, that's right, and my social marketing people will kill me if I don't ask you to please like our Facebook page, join us on Twitter, and visit our website, because my daughter works for my marketing agency, and she said, Dad, don't forget to tell them about Facebook, Twitter, and the website. So I'm putting that on video. Samantha, this one's for you, so to keep my promise. I also promised that if you came to this session today, you would receive a commemorative Lainie's Angels stress basketball in honor of the Louisville Cardinals National Championship basketball team. So please come and claim your prize. We have extras if you have a son or a daughter that plays basketball, or you just want to take an extra one to share with someone on the floor, please do. God bless you all. Thank you so much for listening today. And keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we don't have time for questions, but if anyone would like to stay afterwards, maybe you could ask.
We will hang out. Please come on up. Love to talk with you. And there's flyers again in the back and information.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. That was a pleasure. I'm glad. It's great. It's the first time we've ever done something like this, so yeah, your feedback is appreciated. Any criticism, constructive or otherwise, is appreciated. Yeah. Yeah, no, right. No parent advocate has a kid in treatment. No. Usually if it's a survivor child, we let them come on after about a year or so. As long as things are going well. If it's bereavement, it's 2 years. But we would like it to be 2 years. Although, you know what, we had one mom come on after about a year and a half, but she was like really had